Compare yourself to a chimpanzee, a gorilla, an orangutan. Every single one of our closest living relatives is covered head to toe in thick body hair, and you are not. You are, structurally speaking, one of the strangest primates that has ever existed, because at some point in our evolutionary history, we became naked, almost completely naked, except for a few very specific places. And one of those places is a genuine evolutionary mystery that scientists have been arguing about for decades. Because here's the thing that should be bothering you right now and probably isn't, because you've just never thought about it this way. If losing body hair was such a massive evolutionary win for humans, so useful that it happened across our entire species, why did evolution stop? Why did it leave hair behind in a few specific patches instead of finishing the job? This isn't a random leftover. It isn't evolutionary laziness. Evolution doesn't really do laziness. If a trait sticks around for hundreds of thousands of years, there's usually a reason. And the reasons scientists have proposed for pubic hair specifically are honestly a lot weirder and a lot more interesting than you'd expect. So let's actually figure out why. First, we need to establish something, because most people have a slightly wrong mental model of what happened to human body hair. We didn't lose our hair follicles, count them and a chimpanzee's, and the numbers are roughly the same. What changed is the hair itself. Most of our follicles produce this fine, almost invisible fuzz called vellus hair, instead of the thick, pigmented stuff you'd recognize as actual hair. So, technically, you are just as hairy as a chimp. Your hair just gave up. Except in a few places where it very much did not give up. And those places are specific enough that they can't just be an accident. The leading theory for why we lost body hair in the first place is what's usually called the savanna hypothesis, sometimes the persistence hunting hypothesis. Somewhere between 1 and 3 million years ago, our ancestors moved out of shaded forest environments and into open, hot grassland, and they started doing something almost no other large mammal on the savanna does well: running long distances in the middle of the day. Not sprinting, endurance running. Chasing prey animals for hours until the animal literally overheated and collapsed, while the human, less furry, sweating instead of panting, kept going. Thick fur is an overheating machine on a hunt like that. Losing it and replacing it with millions of sweat glands turned humans into one of the best heat-dissipating mammals on the planet. This is, genuinely, one of our species' secret superpowers, and almost nobody thinks about it. So that explains why hair disappeared almost everywhere. It doesn't explain why it stayed exactly where it did. Here's where it gets interesting, and where the theories start to diverge, and honestly, where scientists start to disagree with each other in ways that get surprisingly heated for people studying body hair. Theory 1. Friction and mechanical protection. This is the boring, sensible explanation, and it's probably at least part of the answer. The regions where humans retain coarse hair, underarms, and the groin are also regions with a lot of skin-on-skin contact, movement, and, let's be delicate about it, activity. Hair in these zones may reduce friction and skin abrasion. It's not a wildly exciting theory, but it's the kind of thing evolution absolutely would select for, because skin damage in these particular areas has historically been a genuinely serious survival problem. Infection in an era with no antibiotics was not something you wanted to be casual about. But friction alone doesn't fully explain the pattern, because there's a second thing going on in exactly the same locations that friction has nothing to do with. Theory 2, and this is the one that gets genuinely weird: scent. The areas of the body that kept hair are also, not coincidentally, the areas with the highest concentration of a specific kind of sweat gland called apocrine glands. Regular sweat, the stuff on your forehead, is mostly water, built for cooling. Apocrine sweat is different. It's thicker, it's oilier, and when bacteria on your skin get hold of it, it produces a distinct smell, which sounds like a bad thing. And in a modern context with soap and 40 different deodorant brands, sure, but in an evolutionary context, body odor was information. And hair is a phenomenal odor-diffusing surface. It massively increases surface area, trapping and slowly releasing scent compounds over time. The same way animals that scent-mark territory rely on fur to hold and spread pheromones. So the theory goes like this: pubic and underarm hair may have stuck around specifically because it made our pheromonal signaling more effective, not less. At exactly the moment in evolution when humans were developing more complex mate selection, more complex social bonding, and more complex chemical communication than almost any other primate, we happened to keep hair precisely at our two major apocrine gland clusters. That is either an enormous coincidence, or it isn't a coincidence at all. And there's a reason to think it isn't a coincidence, because this connects to something else: puberty. Pubic hair doesn't show up at birth. It shows up specifically at sexual maturity, triggered by the exact same hormonal surge, androgens, that also switches on those apocrine glands in the first place. That timing is not a random biological accident, it's a packaged deal. Your body is essentially flipping one switch that says this organism is now reproductively mature, and everything downstream, the hair, the scent glands, the whole system activates together. In an evolutionary sense, this made a walking, visible signal. From a distance, before language, before any social convention existed to announce it, the human body was already broadcasting this individual can now reproduce. Which sounds almost uncomfortably blunt when you say it out loud, but that's more or less what a huge percentage of animal secondary sexual characteristics are for. Peacock feathers exist for a similar reason, just with significantly less subtlety. So now we've got three explanations tangled together: mechanical protection, scent signaling, visual maturity signaling. And the honest scientific answer, the one that doesn't make for a satisfying headline, is that it's probably not just one of these. It's likely all three layered on top of each other, reinforcing each other, which is actually a really common pattern in evolution. Traits rarely survive for one single clean reason. They survive because they're doing two or three useful things simultaneously, and removing any one of those functions would have made the trait less likely to be selected for. Now here's the part that I think is the actually fascinating twist in all of this, because this isn't just an ancient story, it's still happening. Humans across virtually every culture in recorded history have had some kind of relationship with body hair removal, going back thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians removed body hair as a matter of routine hygiene and social status. There's evidence of hair removal practices in ancient Greece, in ancient India, and cultures across the globe that had zero contact with each other. Which is strange if you think about it, because we're talking about completely independent human societies, separated by oceans and thousands of years, all converging on the same basic behavior. Messing with the exact trait evolution worked so hard to keep. And that tension hasn't gone anywhere. It's arguably gotten more intense. Modern grooming trends shift by decade, by culture, by generation, and they shift fast, in a way that a purely biological trait never would on its own. Which tells you something important. This isn't really biology anymore, not entirely. It's biology colliding with culture, with fashion, with shifting ideas about attractiveness and hygiene and identity, layered directly on top of a trait that evolution installed for reasons that have nothing to do with any of that. So you end up with this strange situation where you're carrying around a feature that your body worked extremely hard to preserve for reasons involving scent communication and reproductive signaling systems that predate language itself. And your relationship with that feature is currently being decided by whatever happens to be trending. Evolution spent hundreds of thousands of years engineering a signal. Culture spent considerably less time deciding to argue with it. And that's really the bigger idea sitting underneath this whole video. We tend to think of our bodies as finished products, like whatever we're currently walking around in is just the neutral, default human condition. It isn't. Every hair follicle you have or don't have is the result of an absolutely enormous chain of evolutionary trade-offs stretching back millions of years. Balancing heat regulation against chemical signaling, against social display, against a dozen other pressures we're still working out. Nothing about your body is arbitrary. It's just old enough that we forgot to ask why. So the next time this comes up, and honestly it's probably not coming up in casual conversation, but if it ever does, you'll know. That patch of hair isn't leftover fur evolution forgot to remove. It's a scent diffuser, a friction guard, and a puberty announcement system. All doing their job quietly, the exact same way they have for a few 100,000 years, whether or not you ever asked them to.